I guess LIV is banking on that if Brooks Koepka and Bryson DeChambeau and Dustin Johnson and Phil Mickelson and so on and so forth, and they add more names, big names, huge names, and half the LIV field, they can send out a release that we've got 6 green jackets and these many claret jugs going today, and you need to tune in to see it because they find some iconic golf course to have them on, and they can gimmick it up like that. Maybe you'll find it. Is there any possibility that they do get a television partner? Like the Fox Business Channel or something like that. I mean, like, no, you laugh all you want, man.
No, I know.
Because you just described Kevin. You just described these two entities going at it. Like instead of a Ryder Cup, it's the world versus Saudi Arabia. Yeah. Like that's what you basically just described for a golf competition.
Right. So they had talks with Fox early on, months before and years before any of the names were announced. I think at some point, they got Arlo White, who used to call the Premier League on NBC. So they're trying to legitimize the broadcast. I think we have to see where this goes. I think we have to see if the PR hit dies down. One of the things LIV is banking on, quite frankly, is the idea that by Tournament 5, and I think it'll probably be heightened to Portland for the next event, but by Tournament 5, 6, or 7, people stop asking questions about where the money is coming from. People stop, asking Lee Westwood in press conferences if he wins, whether or not, the question was asked last week, whether or not he'd play a golf tournament for Vladimir Putin. Those sort of questions, do they continue or do they die down? I think once that happens, that's when you might see more legitimate broadcasters say, okay, you know what? You have DJ and Brooks and Bryson. Yeah, we'll pay millions of dollars to broadcast that, or we'll do some sort of revenue sharing thing. But I don't know necessarily what the future of sort of the legitimizing of it is. And I also think that, how compelling is the product going to be? What happens, Rich? There's no cuts in this. What happens if the reason that Brooks and Bryson and Phil and DJ have joined is because they've played their best golf? Does anyone, Phil was 10 over in the first tournament. Does anybody really want to see these guys labor around? So it's a bet not only on the personalities, but that these guys are going to play really, really, really good golf. If Abraham Answer goes out there and destroys all these big names, I think that they have a bit of a problem.
Well, I don't think Kevin Clark of The Ringer here on the Rich Eisen Show, I don't think we'll ever forget where the money's coming from. I
agree.
Because, it's all about the money, why these guys are joining, right? It's not like Brooks Koepka really loves the idea of a shotgun start. Or Dustin Johnson really wanted to screw the PGA Tour. Honestly, it's because there's a bottomless pit of appearance fee money for a league and an entity that does not care about turning a profit. So it's all about the money, and it's about a bottomless pit of money that let's just put it this way: if the XFL or USFL had $2 billion to blow, right, then there might be an issue with them competing against the NFL. You know what I'm saying? That's a fact.
I totally agree.
Or any league.
I had a discussion last week with a friend, and I said, if your business model can be disrupted in a week like this, did you have a bad business model? Is that evidence you had a bad business model? And they said, well, let me push back on that. What sport couldn't be completely disrupted by this sort of thing, by the Saudi PIF investing? And you think about the NFL, Rich. You could, in theory, so the analogy, Dustin Johnson's making about 60% more than he's ever made in his career earnings, over the next 4 years. The analogy there, math-wise, is if Aaron Rodgers were signed to a 4-year, $436 million contract. That's the equivalent of what Dustin Johnson is getting relative to his career earnings, okay? But what I think is, okay, in theory, in 2 years when Aaron Rodgers is ready to wind things down, in theory you could get Aaron Rodgers. In theory, you could get Matt LaFleur. But what you can't get is Lambeau Field, Matt LaFleur, and Aaron Rodgers all working in concert together in the traditions that we know every Sunday. That's why you get 50 million people watching a playoff game, 40 million people watching a playoff game. And that, to me, I think that the cap of a new sort of league is always going to be sort of AAA, AA in some cases, because we just have things that we're used to seeing, and it's really hard to disrupt sports in that way and really take over. But to answer your question about whether or not we're going to forget, There was a guy, Jamie Weir, on the No Laying Up podcast last week talking about Newcastle United. This fund also owns the soccer team Newcastle United. Mm-hmm. And for 2 months, everybody said, okay, they're going to sign these guys with Saudi money and whatever. And then it kind of defaulted to, this guy looks pretty good. The manager's doing a good job. I do think that there can be an element of fatigue, and that's why I don't think we're ever going to figure out where the money comes from. But the more sports that's played, it's literally called sports washing, and the Saudis have admitted to wanting to do it. They say it on their own website. Not that term, but what they're trying to do. And they think the more sports that's played, the less we talk about it, and typically that's how it's worked before, Rich.